Hey everyone, welcome to the Get Real podcast. We're so excited that you're with us. Each and every week, we're going to open up God's Word. We're going to have some discussion around what it means to live an intentional life. So let's listen in as we try to get real together.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Get Real podcast. My name is Brandon Ginden, and I am the senior pastor at Real Life Ministries, Texas, and I am here with my podcast partner and friend, Lori Arnold.
Hi, friends.
And also my dear friend, Duane Dollar.
Hi, friends.
And I'm going to be interviewing him, or we are going to be interviewing him here and talking about, because of this whole series we've been in, is how do you live out your faith in the workplace? And what does it look like? Because we care very much on this podcast about just the day-to-day life of following Jesus. What does it look like that it's real, and we run into these real issues, and what, not a greater topic than what that looks like out in the world in everyday workplace. That even though Lori and I work in the church, it just matters to us that all of you are getting perspectives from, that's just not from two the people that are on a staff at a church, but from everyday folks that work out in the workplace, just like many of you. And one thing I want to put on the front end of this episode, which is really important to me, is to mention the fact that my friend Duane, we've been friends for a while and here in the church, that a big reason this podcast even exists is from your encouragement to me and just challenging me that to find other venues to communicate content. And so I want to tell you thank you, man, and for encouraging and challenging me. And that just means a lot. So thank you for that.
You're very welcome.
Well, Duane, I want to just then jump into it and just, so if you would kind of share just who you are, what you do, kind of the world that you work in every day, and we'll start there.
Yeah, sounds great. So I'm a financial advisor. I've been in the financial services business since 1992. So this is my 33rd year, I guess. And different roles. I've given a couple thousand seminars, traveled the country.
Wow.
And that was a lot of fun until it wasn't. Yeah. Worked at Fidelity Investments and RBC Wealth Management. Now I'm at Ameriprise.
Okay.
And so I've been a personal financial advisor distinctly for the last 15 years.
Okay.
Working with individuals, doing mostly retirement planning. My average client's 75 years old. So that's kind of my wheelhouse. That's what I prefer to work with. And it lends itself to working with widows and widowers. And so it's been a long career. It's gone by fast, like it always does. But I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah. So what's in kind of working in that world? How would you describe kind of the spiritual climate and like kind of where the Lord uses you in that climate of kind of that? Because my mind runs to a lot of probably potential conversations that you have with folks, around finances and age and reality of life and some of those things. So maybe just kind of share some of that climate and what you kind of operate in.
Yeah. So, Wall Street is not known for its Christianity per se. So that part is tough. It's not necessarily East Coast, West Coast thing. It's just a culture, it's driven around money. Yeah. And sometimes the love of money is super present. And so you have to really guard against that. I'm in personal finance, so it makes it a lot easier. So I work with individuals face to face, and that part is wonderful. And I have to remind myself and my team that we're in personal finance. We're not corporate finance. So we get to engage. We get to build personal relationships. And that's the biggest difference. Okay.
So you had mentioned this, the part about kind of meeting there in the personal side of it and the love of money. And you said you really have to guard against that. And so what does that look like, for you, maybe, because there's two parts. There's what you said with your team, and then there's your advising. So kind of there is your employees, if you will, and then the client, right? Type of thing. And so, but you had mentioned kind of guard against the love of money or, materialism. So maybe kind of talk a little bit about, you've done that for a long time. You know how to do that. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, the person with the $500,000 says, boy, if I had $1 million, I wouldn't worry. And the person with $1 million says, if I had $2 million, I wouldn't worry. And so we first try to find out the $64,000 answer to the question, which is, do I have enough? Because here's what happens. When you worry about not having enough, and then you do a financial plan and you realize you have enough, then the focus can shift. Okay, God's provided with what you need, and really what you want. Let's dig a little deeper.
Yeah.
What do you really want to accomplish in your life? What's your legacy you want to leave behind? And then you get into the gifting, charitable giving. And so I like to dig very quickly into that area with clients because it touches your heart.
Yeah.
And that kind of shows where your heart is. And conversely, you have people that have for years saved and scrimped and really done what was necessary to build wealth. And it's difficult sometimes to turn that over and really realize where it came from and then to be generous with that. So that's the love of money, the importance of it, the focus on it is good.
Yeah.
But it can turn into something where you're not as charitable as you need to be and want to be. Maybe you don't see the benefits of it.
Yeah. So what is it? Maybe let's talk a little bit about kind of just, I don't know, skills or things that you've learned kind of in the trade that open the door to have spiritual conversations with people. And Lori, I brought it up on our last episode, so you can be thinking about it as well, is when you've operated outside of the church, like I said, in some of the acting world that you've been in, and some of the singing and all of that issue of there's things that the way you conduct yourself, the questions that you ask or whatever, that opens the door for spiritual conversations. And so maybe Duane, share that a little bit about, what have you learned? Like this has really been effective or helpful in opening the door to spiritual conversations.
Well, I talk politics and religion. They say you shouldn't, but I do.
Okay.
Because that gets to the heart of who a person is, in my opinion. So I'm quick to go down that road. And it does lend itself to the conversation of, where do you go to church? How's your family? How are your relationships with your children?
Okay.
And so people when they start talking about their family and their faith and where they go to church, it opens that door.
Yeah.
And most people are very open to that. One specific example that really resonates, I was having lunch with a client, a long-term client. And before we had our lunch, I said, "Hey, can I pray?" She said, and here's what she said. I always get emotional. She said, "I expect you to." And it dawned on me the importance of my role.
Yeah.
I'm just not a financial advisor. I can, lean into them. I can pray with them, for them.
Sure.
And they expect me to.
Yeah.
And most do.
Yeah.
And so you just have to crack the door open.
Yeah.
And it was a simple thing. Can I pray for lunch?
Yeah.
Can I pray for this meal? And,
sure.
That's just a real simple example.
Yeah.
And it's just wonderful because then you get to really be yourself, in all conversations, in all places.
Sure. In a sense, you're pastoring them, in it, even the topic here is money, but I'm listening to everything you're going, I'm going, my goodness, you're pastoring somebody through these issues in life. So
especially with long-term clients, the first 10 minutes is the numbers. And then the last 50 is, what's going on with your life?
Right.
Can I pray for you?
Sure.
It's not that every single time. I don't want to give that perception.
Sure.
But it does lend itself very much to that personal side of the equation.
Yeah. Yeah. And you've earned the right. Clearly when she says, I expected you to, you've earned the right with her to be able for her to even make that comment back to you.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really great. Yeah.
It's very clear that it's who you are. And we talked a little bit about this before. It's very, very clear for her to say that, that you are living out, all the things that we teach here, that you read in the word, like that you're truly living it out, a lifestyle of walking with the Lord, for her to say something like that. And I think that's one of the most important things that we can do. And it's funny because last episode we talked about the power of just telling somebody that you could pray for them or offering to pray for them, how it does open up so many doors. Yeah. And I know for me, it's been, especially now that I'm in the role that I'm in, it's a lot easier for me to kind of crack the door open because it does it for me a lot of times when people just ask what I do. I remember my hairstylist, he asked what do you do? Like he talked about himself for quite a while, and then, which is great, I was getting to know him. And then he was like, so what about you? And I almost didn't want to tell him because I knew that the conversation was going to change, because it does oftentimes. And it's very similar to when people say I'm a pastor, but when I'm like, I'm a worship director at my church, and he's like, oh, and it got a little quiet for a little bit, but it also opened the door for him to go there and to talk about things that he doesn't talk about with everybody that comes and sits in his chair.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting. Like his voice will even get softer a lot of times when he's talking to me because of what we're talking about. Because you can tell it's not something that is normally talked about.
Yeah.
And so those little bitty, so sometimes it's an opportunity when I do say what I do for a living, but at the same time, I'm like, man, it might shut them down. But oftentimes it doesn't. It might for a little bit. And then they know, like, they typically remember, like, Lori works at a church, so even if they're not walking with the Lord, they have an awareness of my relationship with him. So it's often in the hard times or when they're going through pain or tragedy that I will get a phone call or a text. Can you pray for me? Or they're reaching out, so I think it's the power of prayer is amazing. And just offering that is so crucial.
Yeah, that's really good. Were you going to say something to that? Or, okay. You had mentioned in there, and you said politics and religion, and you said, I just kind of go there. So there's intuitive things that you do, or that's about you, or maybe over the last 5 years or so that you've maybe grown in your own faith or whatever, that's kind of given you a little bit of that boldness and to be able to go there. So talk a little bit kind of behind that, like motivation behind that, and what helps drive that with you when you're sitting across from that client.
Great question. For the longest time, if someone said, "Are you Christian?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm Lutheran." That was my response, and I really loved the Lutheran Church.
Yeah,
and I missed parts of it. But there was a better response, right? A more thorough response. And quite frankly, since I've been at Real Life, the way you preach, the way you teach, being in your small group. I remember one night in your small group, in particular at your house, you're walking through the process of being a disciple, and I'm like, I can do that. I can do that for the rest of my life.
Okay. Yeah.
And I've told you before, I'm not great at scripture memorization, but the big principles, walk in kindness, walk in love, be a fragrant aroma.
Yeah.
As you go.
Yeah.
All these things, that's where my thought is, where my heart is.
Okay. Yeah.
And sometimes the human part comes out, you get anger or whatever.
Yeah.
But the truth is that if I focus on those things in the workplace, you are set apart.
Yeah.
And you can reflect who Jesus is.
Yeah.
Better.
Yeah.
Right? Not perfectly, but better.
Yeah. That's really great. What, when you think about, that's a great answer. When you think about kind of the motivation behind it, let's kind of create a little bit of kind of a scenario here. So for those folks that are out there listening, let's say, they're in an environment where it's somewhat hostile, or it's and there's not a lot of believers. Maybe they're in a work environment, they're the only believer, and it's tough for them. And it's they're listening today, and they're like, well, that's great. You own your business, you can share, or you're not own it, but you're the boss. You can kind of whatever. Let's maybe kind of talk about that for the person that feels isolated or alone, or they're unsure, because stepping in a little bit of that boldness. On our last episode, Crystal shared about kind of being bold. That I'm going to go there with politics or religion, going there. What would we say to somebody that's out there that's taken some of those little steps, or what are some things they could do, or encouragement that you would give to them? Either one of you want to start us off?
Sure. One thing is, I say it a lot, but just keep going. You just got to keep going. And Crystal said on the last episode, she said, just do it. Just do it. And sometimes we have to choose to just do it and do the things that are hard. And one of my professors taught me a long time ago, like, if you are not intentional with sharing the gospel with somebody, it's likely not going to happen.
Right.
So he had us practice sharing the gospel with someone. He had us practice sharing, like, even those starting conversations. How do we start the conversation to open up the door to get people talking? And what I found, it always starts with asking somebody about themselves, and we go from there. And so it can be as simple as that. And I don't want people to think that they have to have it all together in order to start implementing some change in their life. As for sharing the gospel around those, to those around them, even in a hostile environment. One of the things you mentioned was, as you go. It's as you go. It's who you are. And if you're living it out, people are going to see that, and they're going to see Jesus in you.
Yeah.
And that is, to me, one of the greatest witnesses that we can give. It's just the way that we live our lives.
Yeah. That's really great. Duane, any other thoughts you'd have?
Oh, I was on a team at Fidelity Investments, and it was a wonderful group of people, and you don't know who's watching you. And one of my colleagues said, I'm back in church because I see how you operate.
Wow.
I was taken aback. I was like, wow, Mike, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And, he felt a little pressure, right? Now I got to keep this up.
Yeah.
But the truth was I was myself the whole time. Nothing changed. But he said, I like how you operate. Your marriage is successful and you love your kids.
Yeah.
And he saw what I was trying to be was Christ.
Yeah.
So a friend of mine who's a Messianic rabbi, he said, you got to preach every day. And every once in a while, open your mouth.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And he also said, it rains on the just and the unjust.
Yeah.
In a volatile environment at work, you may feel like you're not getting favor at all. The other person is.
Yeah.
And that's hard too.
Sure.
And then the power of prayer.
Yeah.
I ask people to pray for me all the time.
Yeah.
And I ask for people to pray for me today.
Yeah.
For this, I can hopefully say the right words.
Yeah.
So pray for people, and let them know one way or the other that you're praying for them.
Yeah.
Open that door.
That's so good. I think the part that I really want to grab there is just how you live your life. Like, you may never say the words, but to not underestimate that people are watching, that people know, I'm sure you guys have experienced this where you saw somebody and you never even had a conversation with them, but you could tell by the look in their eye, how they conduct, that person's a believer. You just know it. Like, and so to not underestimate that, right? Another thing, I wanted to share this quick story that fits with the two of what you're saying. There's a lady in our church, and she's really quiet. She's a really shy person in our church. And she came in the front door on a Sunday morning, and it just shocked me. She walked by and she had her hand in the air. And I was like, okay. And I walked by and I put my hand up and she just slaps me this big old high five. And it was so out of place for her.
And
right?
It wasn't Martha.
And it wasn't Martha. No. And she slaps me a high five and she goes, I did it. And well, what'd you do? And she goes, I shared my faith with somebody for the first time. And I know this, she's in her 60s.
Yeah.
And I said, tell me about it. And she had shared before, there's not a believer in her workplace. And what she started doing was walking around during her day when she's around, just praying for people. And a coworker came to her and started asking her, and she was like, but I knew the answer. And so I think to that point, right, of being ready to give an answer, not underestimating how you live your life and being able to share when the opportunity comes. And when it does, when the door opens, I think kind of, Lori, what you were saying is being bold and stepping into it. So it's kind of, as we wrap up today, any other kind of thoughts, encouragement, things that you've learned or you would leave people with is, don't forget this, or, hey, remember this when you're walking that out. What is it? Just a word of encouragement for anybody. Thoughts you have.
It's amazing to me how quickly I admit my faults after coming to real life. And the more transparent I am, the more vulnerable I am, the more I'm allowed to speak into someone's life. And it doesn't take much. It just takes that confidence in who the Lord is and what the Lord has done for me. Just having that confidence and just asking God to give you courage.
Yeah.
Just God, just let me say the words.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then let the Holy Spirit do the work.
Yeah. That's so good. Yeah. Lori.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
It's been so good.
Yeah.
But the one thing that I don't want anybody to lose, is the power of prayer.
Yeah.
And we do not serve a distant God.
Right.
He hears us. And just like that woman walked up to the lady at church, and she didn't even go out to her. She'd been praying for her.
Yeah.
Prayer is powerful. And if you don't know where to start there.
Yep.
If you don't know what to say, start there.
Yeah.
Just start there and ask God to give you the words. His Holy Spirit will guide you, and just keep praying.
Yeah.
Just keep praying.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you. That was really powerful. And I'm there was a lot in that to be able to take away, and hopefully for all of you that are watching, to take a nugget out of there and go, I can do this. I can walk through my workplace and pray. I can be bold when God opens that door and gives that opportunity. And I want to say to all of you how grateful I know from both Lori and I, just those of you that follow us and listen and are making those applications and trying to just walk it out every day in real life. And as I've said before, just if this is an encouragement to you and a help to you, to share this episode or the podcast as a whole with your friends and family, and as it continues to grow. And so, Duane, thanks for being here, and God bless you all.
Hey, thanks for joining us on the Get Real podcast today. My hope each and every week is that you're able to take the content, apply it to your life, that it becomes more of who you are and less of what you do, and that we live an intentional life together. If you're interested in supporting the work of ministry here at Real Life Texas, we'd like to invite you to do that by going to reallifetexas.org/give and supporting us today.